In the last video, we talked about the Great Western Schism and how this schism in the end is brought to close by the Council of Constance. Now, I explained that the reason that this council is successful is that it has the support of political power. It has the support of the Emperor Sigismund. And that's in contrast to the previous effort to resolve this controversy through the Council of Pisa, that doesn't have that political support and is unsuccessful. But people at the time saw the council and the idea of councils as a way to govern the church. So to them, this controversy kind of proved that the popes were not reliable. And so there's this idea that the church needs to be governed through councils rather than by popes. And so part of what's built into the Council of Constance is an agreement that there will be a council of the church every 10 years to govern the church and even to kind of supervise and oversee the Pope. So this is yet another challenge to papal independence that we've seen. We've seen the challenge of sort of political interference with the French kings, and we've seen the challenge of authenticity with the Great Western Schism. Now we see the challenge to papal independence coming from within the church itself. This idea that there are going to be councils that are going to govern the church and are going to oversee the Pope. And so the goal of the Renaissance popes as we enter the 15th century after the Council of Constance in 1413 is going to be to reclaim their independence. Now, everyone is so exhausted by from the councils and from the schism. The Council of Constance lasts for 5 years, that no one actually shows up for the first of these periodic councils. And so it's pretty easy for the Pope, Martin V, to just say, okay, we're not going to do this. This is going to be the goal of the popes, to kind of kick these periodic councils further and further down the road until people forget about them and stop demanding them. However, this changes with the election of a new pope, Eugenius IV, when Martin dies. And that's because a new council is declared, and Eugenius tries to close the council. He says, okay, we've had a council, and now the council's over. And the people at the council, the followers of this new theory of conciliarism, say, wait a second, you don't get to decide when a council is open and when a council is closed. The church as a community decides this. And so now you have these two rival groups, Eugenius and the conciliarists. And the conciliarists are meeting in Switzerland, the town of Basel, and it's called the Council of Basel. And so they pass what are known as the pragmatic sanctions. They declare exactly what Philip IV had as his goal about 150 years ago. They say no revenues from the church can be sent to the papacy. Huge threat to papal independence. And the leaders of the conciliarist movement at the Council of Basel even elect someone else to be the Pope. So now, once again, you're back in this horrific situation where you have two people claiming to be the Pope. Now, most people are pretty sure that Eugenius is the real Pope, but there is some doubt. There is some doubt there. And the conciliarists are arguing that if the church is governed by councils, councils and not cardinals should be the ones to elect the new Pope. And so you have this standoff between the Pope and the council that is ended, paradoxically enough, by another council, the Council of Florence. This is the way in which it's actually the Byzantine Empire that saves the independence of the papacy at this time. Byzantine Empire had been getting weaker and weaker throughout the second half of the 14th and into the 15th century. And in the end, the Byzantine Emperor and the Byzantine leaders of the church say the only way that this doesn't end with the Byzantine Empire being conquered by the Ottoman Turks and a Christian empire being conquered by a Muslim power. The only way this doesn't happen is if we get support from the West again. And so even though they don't like the way the Crusaders have behaved sometimes in the history of the Crusades, even though they don't like papal authority, they say it's worth it because we have to make sure that the empire survives. So they send a delegation to the West to ask for support. However, they have their own understandings of how the Western Church works. That's because there was a big falling out, and the original Great Schism was a division between Greek Christians in the Byzantine Empire and Latin Christians in the old Roman Empire over the authority of the Pope. And the Greek Christians didn't like the Pope having this much authority. And so when this delegation is getting ready to leave, the Byzantine Patriarch, the leader of the Greek Christian church, says, remember, Latin Christians are crazy about papal authority. Do not come back unless you've got an agreement with the Pope. And so the Byzantine delegation shows up in Europe, and the conciliarists say, we're having a council right now. You can come, we can arrange a union between the Eastern and Western churches, and we can arrange for you to receive financial and military support to fight against the Turks. And the Byzantine delegation says, that's great. And when does the Pope come to this council? And the conciliarists say, we don't need the Pope at this council. The councils run the church now. And the Byzantines basically say, this doesn't sound authentic. And Eugenius IV seizes this opportunity to say, we are going to have a council, a legitimate council, between Latin Christians and with the Byzantine delegation, and I am going to supervise and call the council into session. Byzantine Christians say, this sounds much more like the Western Church we were supposed to negotiate with. And so Eugenius IV opens a new council, the Council of Florence, in 1439. And as this council goes on, it's more and more apparent that this is the legitimate council and the legitimate authority of the church. It has the Pope there, has a bunch of bishops from the Western Church there, and it has a bunch of churchmen from the Eastern Church there. And so gradually people start to slip away from the Council of Basel and come to the Council of Florence. And this is going to be the way in which the popes overcome this conciliarist movement. And so what's going to happen at the Council of Florence is the Byzantine delegation agrees to everything that the Latin Church wants in order to get the military support they need. And then when they go back, leaders of the Greek Christian church say, no, we're not going to agree to these compromises on our authority. And then when less than 10 years later, the Byzantine Empire is conquered by the Turks, the argument made by Greek Orthodox Christians is that the reason that it fell was because they compromised on their religious teachings. Instead of trusting in God, they trusted in the Latin Church, and they trusted in the Pope and Western Europe to send them funds. And so actually divisions between Eastern and Western Christians are confirmed and reinforced as a fallout from this council. But the most significant result of this council is that Eugenius' authority has been consolidated. And so the conciliarists are left looking weak and petty, and when the new Holy Roman Emperor wants to be crowned by the Pope, Eugenius says, that's fine, but I need you to clear out this Council of Basel first. And so the new emperor takes the army in there, drives the conciliarists out, and so this means that the popes have successfully resisted this threat to their authority. So we've covered the three great challenges faced by the Renaissance popes: the threat of conciliarism, the threat of the Great Western Schism, and the threat of the Avignon Papacy. All of these could have basically destroyed the authority of the papacy, and in fact they gravely weakened it. But at the end of the day, it's 1450, 1430s, 1440s, and the popes are able to return to Rome. Now, remember, what's the goal of the Renaissance? What is the goal of the popes of the Renaissance? The goal is to restore their authority in Rome. Why do they need to restore their authority in Rome? Because it's seen as key to their overall spiritual credibility as leaders of the church, and it's key to their independence. If they establish themselves in Rome, they make it so that they can't get captured and imprisoned in the way Boniface VIII was by Philip IV. All these other disasters don't happen. So that's the goal of these popes. However, the way that they're going to go about achieving power in Rome is going to put further strain, from kind of a different perspective on, again, on their spiritual leadership and their authority. So Martin V is the first pope to be able, and so Martin V is the pope who's elected at the end of the Council of Constance. He's the first pope to be able to re-enter and live in Rome for basically 100 years in 1420. Then Eugenius's pontificate is taken up by the Council of Florence and is taken up by these conflicts with the conciliaries. When he dies in 1447, he's succeeded by Nicholas V, who's the first pope who we're going to look at in some detail here. And Nicholas is the first pope who's committed to restoring the city of Rome. And so with the papacy gone, you have far fewer pilgrims and people traveling to Rome. Rome loses a lot of revenue and the city had fallen into disrepair. And we even have accounts that there are packs of wolves that are roaming the street. So it's become a very unsafe and unclean city. And Nicholas cleans it up. He cleans and paves the main streets of the city, and he restores the city's water supply. So here we have the very famous Trevi Fountain. It's one of the most popular tourist sites in Rome. It's basically the conclusion of an aqueduct that's bringing water to the city, and it's an aqueduct that was restored and repaired by Nicholas V. Why is this so important? It's so important because it's seen as restoring the glories and the achievements of the Roman Empire. This was the system of infrastructure that the ancient Roman Empire was able to achieve. It had fallen into disrepair. It's now been restored. Who's it been restored by? It's been restored by the papacy. And so this reinforces papal credibility and papal ability to lead. Nicholas is also going to restore a number of churches. In particular, he takes on the project of restoring the Vatican and rebuilding St. Peter's. You guys probably know what St. Peter's Basilica in Rome looks like today, probably one of the most famous churches in the world, but this is what it looked like at this point. It was a totally different building that was very old, it was falling into disrepair, and Nicholas decided to take on the project of demolishing what was left of it and building a totally new structure. And this is a really bold decision. It's a bold decision because this basilica dated back to the time of Constantine. So it's a really important connection between the popes and the past history of the church. And we've talked about how that is a big part of what gives the popes their authority. However, in rebuilding St. Peter's, in building a newer, bigger, better St. Peter's, the message that Nicholas is trying to send is that Rome and the papacy are restored, and that the papacy is in a position to promote, to take up a position of leadership in the church and in society. And Nicholas V is also going to do this with the opening of the Vatican Library. Nicholas felt great guilt. We're told that it was during his pontificate that the city of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire were finally conquered by the Ottoman Turks. He felt that this happened on his watch. He should have done more. He should have provided more support. He should have sent a crusade. He did none of these things. And we think that he would have tried, but he fails. So he encourages Greek scholars who are fleeing from Constantinople to come to Rome, and he encourages them to bring Greek texts with them that they're rescuing from the Ottoman Turks and to house these manuscripts in the Vatican, and so he establishes the Vatican Library. Still today, one of the most important repositories for rare and valuable texts. He establishes basically the first Vatican Library with about 5,000 volumes. And so this is another way in which Nicholas is sending the message that the papacy is restored and is in a position to take up a role of spiritual and cultural leadership. We'll talk more about the later Renaissance popes in the next video.